Imagine for a second you win the lottery. And I'm not talking about a scratch-off. I mean a huge life-changing jackpot.
The dream.
Right. So you buy the mansion, you get the yacht, you hire a chef. Life is great. But then you make this one tiny, catastrophic mistake.
Oh, boy.
You assume you're going to win that same lottery again next year and the year after that. So all those huge expenses, you lock them in permanently.
That's the classic lottery winner's curse. And, it almost always ends with a bankruptcy lawyer and a much, much smaller apartment.
Exactly. Now, just take that same bad decision, multiply it by about 39 million people, and you have the current financial state of California.
A pretty good analogy, actually.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a financial whiplash that is, honestly, it's hard to believe even when you see the numbers right there in front of you.
It's a story of some extreme highs and, well, some terrifying lows. We're looking at a whole stack of sources reports from the Legislative Analyst's Office, budget breakdowns, columns from veteran observers like Dan Walters.
And they all tell the same story.
They do. They paint this picture of a state that went from the biggest surplus in the history of, well, any American state, to this frantic multi-billion-dollar scramble just to keep the lights on.
And this wasn't a slow decline. We're not talking about a decade.
No, not at all. This happened fast. Incredibly fast. Like 2 years.
So we're going to get into how that happened.
Yeah.
But we also really need to look at the bag of tricks, the fiscal gymnastics the state is using to hide some of the damage.
And that specific school funding maneuver.
Oh, that maneuver. That is a whole rabbit hole in itself.
It's a deep one.
It's a trick so controversial, it has somehow managed to unite the teachers' unions and the hardcore taxpayer watchdogs, which that never happens.
No. When those two groups are screaming about the exact same thing, you know something very, very strange is going on. Yeah. It's a real check engine light for the state's fiscal health.
Okay, but before we dive in, let's just orient everyone. If you're listening to this from outside California, you might be thinking, so what? Why do I care?
And you should care. Because California is a massive economy. I mean, if it were a country, it'd be the 5th largest in the world. But maybe more importantly, this is a perfect case study.
A case study in what?
In what happens when a government just assumes the good times will last forever. It's a lesson in volatility and, frankly, the consequences of a massive spending binge.
So let's start at the very top of that roller coaster. Take us back to 2022. I remember the headlines. California had so much money, they literally didn't know what to do with it.
And that wasn't an exaggeration. In May of 2022, Governor Gavin Newsom announced a surplus of $97.5 billion.
Almost $100 billion. That's insane.
It was completely historic. I think Newsom's quote was, "No other state in American history has ever experienced a surplus as large as this." It was a victory lap. There was this feeling that the California model was just invincible.
The good times would never end.
Exactly. The tech sector was booming, stock market was roaring, and the tax coffers were just overflowing.
So what happened? Did somebody just, walk off with the money?
In a way, the economy just took it all back. To really understand the crash, you have to understand where that surplus even came from. The sources we have here call it a phantom surplus.
A phantom? Like a ghost? You mean it wasn't real?
Well, the cash was real. It was in the bank. But the source of it was temporary. You had this perfect storm of 3 things happening all at once.
Okay.
First, you had this huge economic bounce back after the pandemic. Second, the federal government had just pumped trillions in relief funds into the economy. And third, and this is the big one, you had a massive tech and stock market bubble.
Right, and because California taxes its wealthiest residents so heavily, when their stocks go up, the state gets a huge cut.
Precisely. The tax system there is incredibly progressive. It leans very heavily on capital gains taxes from the top 1% of earners. So when those people are selling tech stocks for huge profits, the state gets rich.
But that's volatile.
Extremely volatile. They scream up and then they crash down.
And the governor and the legislature, they treated it like it was a permanent pay raise.
That is the lottery winner mistake right there. The budget staff, the lawmakers, they looked at this one-time geyser of cash and said, great, this is our new normal. Our sources say they were using outdated forecasting models and just a heavy dose of, well, wishful thinking.
Spending spree gets thrown around a lot in politics. Do we have any hard numbers on how much the spending actually went up?
We do. And they're pretty stark. Dan Walters, who's been covering California politics forever, he points out that during Newsom's time in office, state revenues, the money coming in, grew by about 60%.
Which sounds pretty good on its own.
It is good, but Total spending. Spending grew by 72%.
Whoa. Okay, so spending grew faster than the money coming in.
A lot faster. They went from a budget of around $203 billion to nearly $350 billion. They expanded programs, created brand new ones, and they locked in all these ongoing costs.
Wait, explain what you mean by ongoing costs, because if I get a bonus at work and I go buy a nice watch, that's a one-time expense. I'm broke next month, but, I still have the watch.
Right. But the state didn't just buy a bunch of watches. They signed up for a much more expensive country club membership. They expanded healthcare access, increased social safety nets, hired more people. These are bills that come due every single month forever.
And then the music stopped.
Pretty much. The Federal Reserve hiked interest rates to fight inflation. That easy money dried up. The housing market slowed down. Tech companies started doing layoffs. And capital gains revenue, that cash cow, it just fell off a cliff.
So now you've got a budget that was built for a billionaire lifestyle, but you're back on a middle-class salary.
And that is what creates what economists call a structural deficit. It's not just a one-time hole you can plug with some spare cash. It means your baseline lifestyle now costs more than your baseline income month after month.
Okay, so the credit card bill is officially due. And depending on who you ask, the deficit is somewhere between $45 and $68 billion. Those are huge, abstract numbers, but the consequences are very real.
Very real. And what's tragic is that the cuts are now hitting the exact same programs that were just expanded during those boom years. It's a classic boom and bust cycle, and vulnerable people are the ones getting caught in the gears.
Let's talk about some of those cuts. Where is the axe falling hardest?
Well, Health and Human Services is taking a major, major hit. Just a couple of years ago, the state had this very ambitious goal to expand Medi-Cal, that's their Medicaid program, to all low-income residents, regardless of their immigration status.
I remember that. It was a huge headline, Healthcare for All.
And now comes the reality check. Starting January 1st, 2026, they are effectively freezing that expansion. If you're an undocumented adult over 19 and you aren't enrolled by that date, the door is closed.
So it went from everyone is welcome to sorry, we're full.
Essentially, yeah. And even for the people already in the system, it's getting more expensive. They're adding premiums for undocumented adults, about $100 a month, and they're also cutting some state-only benefits, which includes things like dental and long-term care.
And I saw something in here about IHSS, in-home supportive services. That one seems particularly tough. That program keeps elderly people out of nursing homes.
It is. IHSS pays caregivers, who are often family members, to help elderly or disabled people stay in their own homes. The new proposal caps provider hours. It limits overtime and travel time to a hard 50 hours a week.
Which, sounds like a standard work week, but I imagine if you're a caregiver, you're not just clocking out at 5 p.m.
Not at all. If you're caring for a high-needs relative, you're on the clock 24/7. This cut basically says to those caregivers, we can't pay you for the full reality of your job anymore. It saves the state money, yes, but it puts just immense stress on a very vulnerable workforce.
And there are also cuts to things we probably take for granted. I was surprised to see pharmacy benefits on the list.
Yeah, over-the-counter meds. If you're on Medi-Cal, the state used to cover things like Tylenol, cough syrup, allergy medicine. That's going away. And a big one, they are removing coverage for GLP-1 weight loss drugs.
Oh, like Ozempic and those.
Right. Those drugs are incredibly expensive. Cutting them saves a lot of immediate cash, even if, arguably it could cost more in long-term health issues down the road. But that's the theme here.
Immediate cash savings over long-term strategy.
It feels like survival mode. And we're seeing it in public safety, too. The state is deactivating the Chuckawalla Valley State Prison and closing housing units in 11 other facilities. The Department of Corrections is getting hit with a nearly $400 million cut.
Okay, but hold on a second. I'm looking at the size of this deficit. Let's just say $68 billion to be safe. And I'm looking at these cuts. Cutting Tylenol coverage and closing one prison, that does not get you to $68 billion. The math just doesn't add up.
You are absolutely spot on. If they actually cut $68 billion worth of services overnight, the state's economy would probably go into shock. The cuts we just talked about, they only cover a tiny fraction on the whole.
So how are they balancing the books? If they're not cutting enough and they don't have the revenue, where's the money coming from?
And this brings us to what the critics are calling the bag of tricks, or, if you want to be formal, fiscal maneuvers.
I do love a good euphemism. So what does that actually mean?
It means moving money around, borrowing from the future and using some pretty creative accounting gimmicks to make the deficit look smaller than it actually is.
Okay, give me an example. What's this MCO tax I keep reading about?
This is a classic shell game. So MCO is a managed care organization, basically a health insurance plan. The state taxes these plans. Now, usually the point of this tax is to get federal matching funds to pay doctors more.
Right, because Medi-Cal pays so little that a lot of doctors won't take those patients. And voters actually passed a proposition to use this money to pay doctors more.
Exactly. But the governor's office is looking at that big pot of money and saying, you know, I have a giant hole in the general fund. I'm taking that. So they're diverting billions of those tax dollars to plug the budget gap instead of increasing payments for doctors.
So money that was meant to help a low-income patient see a doctor is now just keeping the lights on in Sacramento.
That's a good way to put it, yes. And it's really risky because if you divert too much, the federal government can step in and say, hey, that's not what this program is for, and just disapprove the whole tax. But the state is desperate.
And what about businesses? Are they getting hit?
They are. There's a suspension of what's called the net operating loss deduction.
Okay, translate that for those of us who are not CPAs.
Sure. So normally if a business loses money one year, the tax code lets you deduct that loss from your taxes in future profitable years. It helps businesses get through a downturn.
Makes sense.
Well, California is now suspending that for any business with income over $1 million. They're basically saying, we don't care if you lost money last year. You can't use that deduction right now. We need the cash.
So they're squeezing businesses right when the economy's starting to get a little wobbly.
Correct. But the most creative and, frankly, the most confusing trick is what I've started calling time travel accounting.
Yep.
It has to do with the state's payroll. There's a proposal to just shift payday by one day. By moving a payday from June 30th to July 1st, they can push billions of dollars in expenses from this year's budget into next year's budget.
That sounds almost childish. That's like me paying my rent on the 1st of the month instead of the 31st and then telling my wife we saved all that money.
It is exactly that. It doesn't save a single dime. It just kicks the problem 24 hours into the future, so the spreadsheet looks balanced for one day. It's like putting today's lunch on a credit card you won't pay off for 10 years.
But none of this even compares to the really big one, the controversy that has everyone up in arms, the school funding maneuver.
Ah, yes. This is the heavyweight champion of accounting gimmicks.
So set the stage for us. California has a law, Prop 98, right?
Right. And Prop 98 is the third rail of California politics.
Yeah.
It basically guarantees that about 40% of the state budget goes to K-12 schools and community colleges. It's a complicated formula, but the basic idea is if the state makes more money, schools get a guaranteed slice of it.
Okay, so now revenues are down, so schools should be getting less money.
Theoretically, yes. But here's the problem. Back in 2022, the big boom year, the state sent a massive amount of extra money to schools based on those super high revenue projections, about $8.8 billion.
And the schools got it? They spent it?
They got it. They budgeted for it. Some of them definitely spent it. And now the state is realizing, oops, we didn't actually have that money to give you.
So they have to eat that loss.
Well, normally, yes. But Governor Newsom has this new idea. He wants to go back in time and retroactively reclassify that $8.8 billion.
Reclassify it as what?
A loan.
A loan.
An interest-free, off-the-books loan. The state is telling the schools, hey, remember all that money we gave you last year? Yeah, that wasn't a grant. It was actually a loan. But don't worry, you don't have to pay us back. We're just going to write it down on our books as a loan that gets forgiven over the next 5 years.
My brain hurts. If the schools don't have to actually pay it back, why does it matter what they call it?
Because of the Prop 98 formula, this is the really devious part. By calling it a loan retroactively, the state gets to claim on paper that they spend less on schools in 2022 than they actually did.
And since Prop 98 is based on a baseline from previous years.
You got it. If you artificially lower the baseline from the past, the formula tells you that you're required to spend less in the future. It permanently, or at least for a very long time, lowers the minimum funding guarantee for public education.
So it's a self-cut. They're not taking the cash back today, but they're making sure schools get billions less in the future.
And that is why the California Teachers Association is furious. Their president called it an outright assault on public school funding. But, and this is the amazing part, the taxpayer watchdogs hate it just as much.
Why? I thought tax watchdogs would love any kind of spending cut.
They care about transparent government. And if the governor can just decide to go back in time and change the definition of spending to loan whenever he makes a forecasting mistake, then the budget becomes meaningless. The nonpartisan legislative analyst's office called it bad fiscal policy that sets a terrible precedent.
It's a slippery slope. Today it's schools. Tomorrow it could be roads or pensions or anything.
It just erodes all trust. You're essentially gaslighting the state's own financial ledger. You're telling people money wasn't spent when everyone knows it was.
So zooming out here, we have cuts hitting the most vulnerable. We have accounting tricks that would, make an Enron executive blush. We have the governor fighting with the teachers. Why go to all these lengths? Why not just admit the problem's huge and deal with it head on?
Politics. I mean, you have to look at the timeline. Governor Newsom is termed out soon. He has national political ambitions. He cannot leave office with a headline that says, left California $60 billion in debt.
He needs the headline to say, balance the budget.
Even if that balance is held together with duct tape and IOUs, the sources we're looking at suggest he's just trying to bandage this self-inflicted wound long enough to hand the keys over to the next person.
It's the old kick the can down the road strategy.
And that can is getting very, very heavy. The legislative analyst's office is projecting deficits of $20 to $35 billion annually for the next several years. This isn't a one-year storm. This is like climate change for the budget.
And we haven't even talked about the reserves, the rainy day fund.
They're burning right through them. They're pulling billions from the rainy day fund as we speak.
Which leads to the really scary thought I wanted to end on. We are doing all of this, burning reserves, using accounting tricks, deferring payments, during a time when the national economy is actually pretty okay.
Right. Unemployment is low. GDP is growing. We are not in a national recession.
So, if California is maxing out all its credit cards just to buy groceries during the good times, what on earth happens when a real recession hits?
That is the absolute nightmare scenario. If the tech bubble really bursts or the housing market collapses and the state has already used up its reserves and all its accounting tricks, there's just no safety net left.
It's a sobering thought. We went from the gold rush to pawning the silver in record time.
It's a real lesson in humility, The economy is cyclical, and if you build a permanent government on temporary profits, gravity will eventually catch up with you. And right now, gravity is pulling very, very hard on Sacramento.
Well, on that cheerful note, I think we'll wrap it up. This has been the deep dive into California's budget mess. If you learned something today, or if you just need a stiff drink now, maybe share this with a friend who loves asking, where'd all the money go?
And maybe save a little extra in your own rainy day fund while you're at it.
Good advice. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.